Hello, everyone, and welcome to this lecture. It's best going forward to tell you what I expect of you on the exam, and then discuss the writing assignment that's necessary for this course. So in the following presentation that's been uploaded, which is called the exam and writing assignment, I'm going to be going over uh, what the exam will look like. In other words, I'm giving you the study guide the first day, the first thing, because don't get intimidated. You haven't been taught the analytical tools to answer these questions. You will. But by showing you the format of the exam ahead of time, it hopefully will program you about what you should be taking notes on during class. So if I go to the exam, PowerPoint, here we go. And what we're going to go over today is the exam and then the writing assignment, or how you will be writing the history of 2020. So let's start with the exams. The exams they're going to be two exams, non-cumulative. In other words, just think of them as two, if you will, midterms. And of course, you'll be given a study guide. This is what we're going to be going over. And then right before the exam, we will then be discussing, we'll be reviewing the material to help you do well on this exercise. The point of the exam is the whole ethos of this course is we're looking at a scientific phenomena, a disease. But I want you to have the analytical tools to examine them from a humanist perspective. The primary materials then I'll be grading you on are a primary source, a secondary source, a painting, meme, or political cartoon, and a video. So the best way to examine this is, let's go to the study guide. And just give me a second while I pull it up. Okay. Now the key is, let's even use these meditation chimes. Don't worry, relax as we go over this, because at this point of the course, you wouldn't be able to answer these questions. That's the whole point of this course, is to teach you how to critically analyze information that you are exposed to about the pandemic, but then also critically analyze information about past pandemics and see how they inform our understanding of this current pandemic. Okay, so let's go over this. The exam will be take home. You will have 24 hours to complete it. There will be four sort of questions on the exam. First of all, you'll have two secondary source questions. Okay, and what is a secondary source question? It is usually, in this case, media articles. So they could be media articles about past pandemics or media articles about this current pandemic. And hopefully you are reading the news and media about this pandemic. And you will be assigned articles that uses history or past pandemics to make sense of COVID-19. You will be exposed to two sorts of media in this course, and hopefully in your daily lives as you're following the news. The first is an op-ed. An op-ed is written by an expert on the field. And in most cases, most of the op-eds I'll be assigning you are written by historians or scholars of literature that are using past pandemics to make sense of COVID-19. So the first hypothetical article that you will be getting, or a secondary source, is this article. It's written, I'm giving you an article written by me. It's March 3rd, 2020, so in the early stages of the pandemic. And what makes this a secondary source? I have not experienced the pandemics directly in the Middle East. When it hit Iran, I was not there. I have relatives there. They're telling me about it. In fact, I had relatives who passed away from the COVID-19 in Iran, but I was not on the ground experiencing the events. That's what makes this a secondary source. Okay, so this article, The Coronavirus and Biosecurity in the Middle East, that was an opinion editorial written for the Pacific Council. You would have read it during the semester. And 24 hours is plenty of time for you to go back and read it again. In fact, you should be reading it again. The question I would be asking about this article, so you have to imagine on the day of the midterm, you'll be getting an article, an op-ed, and you will be asked these two questions. Notice how I'm very clear in the breakdown of the points. I want you to show that there's no arbitrariness in the assignment of your grades. Every point you get in this class is going to be broken down point by point. Okay, so the first question you would be asked is, give two examples of pre-modernity and two examples of modernity in this op-ed, and explain how each are pre-modern and modern. So as we go through the semester, I'm going to be teaching you what does it mean to be pre-modern and what does it mean to be modern. These are defining questions of our lives, of our age, and these are defining questions amongst historians. How do we delineate what it means to be modern? What does it mean to be modern? And then by definition, what has happened before that would be pre-modern. Over the semester, I'm going to give you a working definition of both. And very simply, the easy way to remember this, to get you to be trained in understanding and analyzing information is this. Modernity, I define as a condition where we live in the age of mass. We use these modern terms in our everyday language without realizing what they mean. When we use mass media, for example, mass media studies, mass transportation, weapons of mass destruction, each of those terms delineates a moment in human history where a condition of mass was achieved. Very simply then, what is the pre-modern? The condition of humanity that existed prior to achieving this massness. Modernity could also be defined as a condition in which humanity started to subscribe to modern ideologies that usually end in an ism, such as capitalism. And what makes capitalism modern? Well, it's an ideology about mass production and mass consumption. Communism. What makes that modern? Well, that's an ideology that focuses on mass production and mass consumption, but with a difference. And what is that difference? Well, the difference is communism says the modern state should manage mass production and mass consumption. Those are just two examples. So I haven't written out the complete, I'm going to tell you an answer, okay? But this is your job to write a cogent sentence answering this. So in this article, and this is what you would want to do on the exam, is simply copy and paste the relevant parts, and then in your own words, explain what is modern and pre-modern. I chose this article specifically because I'm quite explicit in what is pre-modern and modern. Other op-eds might not necessarily be so. It's your job to analyze how they allude to the condition of mass or various isms in their article. So in this article, I refer to pre-modern pilgrimage and COVID-19. What do I mean by pre-modern pilgrimage? Well, before the modern era, and just a rough guide, the modern era is usually delineated around 1500, is when we could say the human trajectory began to enter the condition of modernity. Pilgrimages to religious sites have been conducted before the modern era. In Spain, there's the famous pilgrimage route, to Santiago de Compostela, a pilgrimage that usually did on foot, not with the means of mass transportation, to a pre-modern site, the cathedral that houses the body of St. James. In this day and age, you see the pre-modern and the modern coexist. Okay? You could fly to the origin point of the pilgrimage. You could fly to France and start the walk from there. In other words, you took a means of mass transportation to get to France. But at the end of the day, you are still walking. That's what makes a pilgrimage a pilgrimage. So in other words, we look at where did COVID-19 begin in Iran? Well, outside of a pre-modern site, the site that houses the body of Fatima, the brother of Imam Ali Reza, a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. Well, these are all pre-modern religious figures. Lebanon's first case was from a pilgrim. Okay, so in other words, pilgrimage is a pre-modern practice that is still practiced today in our modern era. Somebody from Lebanon went to Iran to visit the site, and then thanks to modern transportation, this person was able to bring COVID-19 to Lebanon. So do you see how the pre-modern and the modern coexist? The second case would be a group of South Koreans. Okay, those South Koreans most likely took a flight to visit the site of Jesus's crucifixion. That site is a pre-modern site. Jesus's crucifixion occurred during the pre-modern era. But nonetheless, the ability again to travel mass distances, to bring COVID across continents, that's a modern phenomenon. Then the modern would be the reference to mass media. And what is mass media? TV news can reach a mass audience, okay? What then is pre-modern communication? Well, when we talk with our voices, most of humanity has been that of oral communication. With the invention of newspapers, news channels, that augurs in the age of mass communication. In this article, looking at how certain Arab media outlets spread conspiracy theories would be an example of mass media. So what you would do is I recommend copying and pasting, but then each of your answers explaining, each would be worth 2 points, okay? So, or I did the math wrong, and that's why I'm not so you should have about 4 sentences worth 2.5 points. Sorry about that. Digital conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories spread on the internet, for example, referring to the postmodern, a phase within modernity, post-truth. Okay, all of that is another example. The infodemic that refer to misinformation spread on the internet, that is all the modern aspect. Okay. So that's how you would answer that secondary source. Then the second question on the secondary source would be this. Okay. I will be teaching you various theoretical schools throughout history. What have various political philosophers have said, and how does that apply to the present? Which theoretical school does Ibrahim Al-Marashi belong to? And there's a reason I chose my article, because you're having it from the horse's mouth, which theoretical school I belong to. Well, in this case, I would belong to the liberal school, and the liberal school is associated with Immanuel Kant. We would have talked about him in class. And look at how you get the answer in my article. It's specifically when I refer to international cooperation is needed to tackle this pandemic. And then you would explain how. What are ways of fostering international cooperation in this day and age? Well, by a means such as the World Health Organization that international body, modern international body that's designed to protect the masses of people on this earth and their health. Okay, then the other secondary source question will be from a reporter, which involves on-the-ground media investigation. In this case, I chose an article from the news organization Middle East Eye. The journalist Kareem here, in other words, is just writing about the news. One thing I want to teach you in this class is how to analyze news critically, how to generate greater meaning than the lines on the paper, well, on the screen in front of you. Read between the lines in this article, and I'll ask you now the exact same question. In this case, just one example of pre-modernity and one example of modernity, and explain each. Okay. Well, the first sentence, when it refers to traditional rulers, you see traditional rulers in Lebanon, and of course we would have discussed this article in class, have ruled over various pre-modern religious communities in Lebanon. Lebanon's Christian communities, Muslim communities have existed since the modern era, prior to the modern era. When we refer to, if you see the language sectarian-based, sects, keep in mind that's important. I'm not saying sex as in S-E-X, I am saying sects. Shouldn't say that too loud. S-E-C-T-S, and that's the word sectarian, okay? Those are pre-modern. Now, when we refer to political parties, on the other hand, political parties are modern phenomena that emerge to contest modern elections. What makes elections in this day and age modern? The masses choose their leaders. Okay, so here you have traditional rulers, the pre-modern fusing with the modern political party in Lebanon. And that's a problem because that political system prevents a well-functioning modern state from developing a satisfactory public health campaign. In the US, imagine this. Look how the political bickering between the Democrats and the Republicans prevented a standard public health procedure to deal with COVID-19. Now, in this case, you would have to say, in this media article, how does it align with the theories, schools, and frameworks we have been exposed to class? Okay. Well, we would have discussed this article in class, and you would see that in this class, even though the journalists, because it's not the journalist's job to refer to kind of the humanistic tradition, here we see references to the French historian Michel Foucault and the Florentine political scholar during the Renaissance, Niccolo Machiavelli. Look at this sentence here. The state we have in Lebanon is nothing but an archipelago of clientist networks. Okay. And then this second sentence, clientist relations have exposed the shell that is the Lebanese state. Okay. So in class, we would have studied how both Foucault and Machiavelli discussed the state. Of course, Machiavelli discussing the state during the Renaissance, Michel Foucault discussing the state in the 1970s, but looking at the state over a historical trajectory and how it dealt with pandemics in the past. Now, in this particular case, what would Michel Foucault say? Well, in class, we will be introduced to this concept of biopower. And biopower was Michel Foucault's way of saying, how strong is the state in managing the biological health of its citizens? If Michel Foucault were alive today, he passed away due to another pandemic known as AIDS. But if he were alive today, what would he say of the situation? The Lebanese state is so weak due to these sectarian party rivalries, it doesn't maintain enough biopower to maintain the health of its citizens. That's the sentence you would write for 5 points. For another 5 points, you would refer to Machiavelli. And what would Machiavelli say? Machiavelli argued that the key for a functioning state is that it has a leader that's both feared and loved. In Lebanon, you have neither. The leaders are neither feared nor loved. Okay. And why is that problematic? Well, it's problematic because if you neither fear nor love your leaders, you won't obey them when it comes to obeying various public health measures. And that's what makes the situation of COVID-19 so dire. So in this case, these are secondary sources very much dealing with writing the first draft of history, because that's what journalism does of this pandemic. Now, the primary documents will be sources directly from the past. In this case, you would have the title of two primary sources, and you would go back to the readings and reread them again. Here, I just gave you two excerpts from primary sources that you will be reading, okay, to help better understand how to answer this question. The primary documents need to be compared, and this will be worth 30 points. So here we have a primary document, and I just chose the best part of this primary document. So this is now two accounts of what it was like to live during the Great Plague of the 1300s, otherwise called today the Black Death. The people living through it didn't call it the Black Death. That's a term historians use to describe it. And of course, the color black referred to the buboes that emerged on your bodies that were black in texture and color. Yeah, of course, this is a reference to the bubonic plague. So what is Marchione di Stefani writing about the conditions of the Black Plague? Well, this is just one sentence I liked. I mean, I don't like it, but it's just so, well, let's read it. Bodies were thrown into deep trenches every night. The next morning, if there were many bodies in the trench, they covered them over with dirt. And then more bodies were put on top of them with a little more dirt over those. They put layer on layer, just like one puts layers of cheese in a lasagna. And I just couldn't, okay, you have to laugh that even an Italian, even in the most horrid conditions, still thinks of pasta. I mean, I just, that was just one sentence that, okay, Ibn Khaldun is living in the Middle East. Ibn Khaldun is considered the father of sociology. And notice he's witnessing the very same events. And here he's talking about the collapse of civilization. Cities and buildings, roads and waysigns, depopulated. The entire inhabited world changed, okay? Of course, they're going to be saying a lot more, and you'll be reading what they say. So in this particular, these two documents, you would compare who produced these documents. And in each primary source, before the actual source, you have a summary of who these figures were. That's how you know who they are. So you would look at them and you would compare. Marchione giving the perspective from Italy, the place where the plague first landed in Europe, and which was hardest hit. And then you would compare him to Ibn Khaldun, a sociologist, or what, well, today we call sociologist, but in his day and age, he was writing, he would also be considered a historian. So you would compare their background. And then for another 5 points, you have to tell me what is happening. So you would have to refer to how the Black Plague emerged in Inner Central Asia, how it traveled across Mongol trade routes, entered an Italian port city called Kaffa, and from there land went to both the Middle East and Europe at the same time. Then this is the part which requires, think of this almost as a short essay, a short, concise essay. Give me 5 strong sentences. Each is going to be worth 4 points, okay? Why are these documents significant for the history of pandemics, okay? And a good way to think of the answer is think of what is modern and pre-modern of the documents. So in these cases, well, this is pretty much a pre-modern plague, but why are they significant? So you would have to think about it. But the most obvious answer would be, you would be writing about the horrendous death toll of this plague, how deadly it was, how it transformed the world. And what are some, so first of all, you would write just about how much of the world where the plague spread, how much the population was, well, depopulated. And then, of course, and I would have discuss these primary sources with you. I mean, half of this exam is testing how well you were paying attention during the lectures. You would have written in Europe, for example, what was one of the consequences? Well, the depopulation led to a lot fewer people out there who could work. And when you had a lot fewer people who could work, what happens? Those workers could ask for higher wages. And then what is one of the consequences of the Black Death in Europe? It ended the feudal system, this kind of almost slave-like system where people were considered as property associated with the land who weren't really given livable wages. Another great outcome of the Black Death. So that would be one strong sentence for 4 points. A second sentence could be, with the rise of wages, disposable income emerged. And with disposable income, you had also a flowering of arts and culture in Italy, leading to the birth of the Renaissance. That would be another good 4 points. You would mention that in the Middle East, you did not have a similar transformation. And in class, I would have discussed that. So that would have been a third sentence, and then write 2 more sentences. And that would be a proper, short, very short essay for 10 points. I'm sorry, excuse me, 20 points. Then you'll be given an image. And of course, images like this we would have discussed in class. Prior to the exam, I'm going to give you a PowerPoint because we're going to look at a lot of the images, but not all the images you're going to be responsible for. With those images, so for example, you would get a PowerPoint like this, and then you would have a brief description of what this image is, its historical context. And of course, we would have discussed this image in detail during class. So what would you be asked about an image like this? And this is just to teach you how to critically analyze visual images. So whether it's paintings from the past, political cartoons, art in general, what is this image depicting? So you would tell me this image is depicting the horrendous death toll of cholera. Now, cholera, you would have learned in class, is a waterborne disease that spreads through contaminated water and was deadly because once it enters the body, it causes kind of a severe dehydration to the point where your organs fail and you die. And there was no treatment for cholera. There was no forms of kind of antibiotics to help you recover from an infection of cholera. So you would say this is referring to a cholera infection during what? Where does cholera spread predominantly? Usually during wars, when armies are drawing upon a contaminated water source. Wars are deadly, but what do we appreciate from this image? What does it remind us of? You have the killing that's done by man against man during war. But we often tend to forget in history, a lot of the death in warfare is because of infectious diseases that usually coincide with the conditions of war. You see, if you have an army concentrated in one area, drawing upon a single source of contaminated water, that could kill as many soldiers as a cannon or machine gun. That's the significance of this document. What was the historical context of it? Should be this image, what was happening. So you would refer to that particular war. Why is that image significant for the history of pandemics? Well, I gave you the answers. It reveals that during wartime, infectious diseases can be just as deadly. You would refer to there was no cure for cholera back then. And so on and so forth, for again, 5 sentences, each worth 4 points for 20 points. Okay. What is here? Just another example. And here, it's not something you cram or memorize for. You would look at this and think, what is modern about this image? Well, this wasn't an individual painting. You see, individual paintings are pre-modern in the sense they're not mass-produced. You draw a painting, think of Leonardo's Da Vinci's Mona Lisa. There was only a single painting for a single patron. Okay, it was not mass-produced. Of course, reproductions of the Mona Lisa in the modern era are reproduced, right? This image, on the other hand, was meant for mass media, mass circulation media. So another strong sentence using the framework of modernity is, this shows the modern horrors of disease via the mass media. And then you ask yourself, the horrors of COVID-19, are they not augmented and spread because we live in an age of mass media? So whether it's 1912 or 2021, see, in this case, history is the study of continuity and change. This is one example of continuity. Okay. And then finally, for 10 points, I will give you a link to a video and you will analyze it with just a single question. Why is this video significant for the history of pandemics? Again, prior to the exam, I'm going to give you a list of URLs and say, watch these videos again. We would have watched these videos in class, but what I'm going to say is watch these videos again to prepare yourself for the exam. And again, this is just a way to teach you how to critically analyze the videos, YouTube, the news that we consume in our daily lives. It could be a video about a past pandemic or the current COVID-19 pandemic. So look at the video I've chosen, and I want you to think, why is this video significant? So let's go to the link. Sorry about that. Give me a second. I forgot where I put it. Very good. Okay. So let's pick a video by yours truly, okay? And even this video, now you see, you would want to look at the date. It's March 17th, 2020. And you see, we're almost, even back then, a lot has happened to make this video a historical piece, okay? Because what I said in this video reflected the science of the time and what we knew about COVID-19. Now, if you watch this video, the advice I give, God, my shirt is way unbuttoned. I just realized that now. It's that's such a Middle Eastern man thing to do. It's the microphone's fault. I think when they went put it through my body, I forgot to button it. So sorry about that. But anyway, look at this video that I'm going to give you. The information is accurate. But it's like, this is the thing with science. Science is only as good as the information available during that time. Okay? And so when we analyze this, you're gonna see, it's not that there's anything factually wrong, but there's something that is being neglected to be mentioned. So, and of course, with science, it's perfectly normal to say, okay, what did we know at that time? What mistakes were made? And what can we learn from the mistakes? Unfortunately, politics doesn't work like that. Politics is a field where people rarely admit they were wrong in the past. So the date is important. Look at March 17th, 2020. What did this video realize in the near history of COVID-19, of what we knew back then? Okay. So it's March 2020. I am in Spain, teaching at IE University, and I'm recording this lecture for the students in Spain, literally 2 days before the university is going to go into lockdown.
I'm Ibrahim Al-Marashi. I'm a visiting professor at IE University. I've been asked a lot of questions by students. As somebody who studies pandemics, I've been asked, how do I prevent getting the coronavirus? The advice I'm going to give you is not going to only help you prevent getting that virus, but any virus that causes the cold or influenza. And the best way to think about this is think about yourself in this story and think about your daily life. Okay? You've woken up. Hopefully you've had more than 8 hours of sleep and you have not gone drinking the night before. The immune system is stronger.
And of course, why do I mention drinking? Because at IE University, this is well, I could say of any university, drinking is a hobby. I don't know how else to put it. So of course I have to address that alcohol consumption.
When you get a lot of sleep and that you're not dehydrated as a result of drinking alcohol. Your temptation might be to get a glass of orange juice. After all, orange juice has vitamin C, and that's supposed to help. That's a medical myth. Vitamin C does nothing to help you prevent getting a virus and does nothing to shorten the duration of a cold. Vitamin C might in fact give you a false sense of security.
Okay, so in class we will be discussing where did the vitamin C myth emerge from? History is full of myth. So is medicine. And in this class, one of the major themes is the combination of historical and medical myths, how they come together. There is a historical reason as to why did the vitamin C myth emerge. And I'll give you the very easiest answer. It was to sell more oranges. The body needs vitamin C. It just doesn't do much to prevent you from getting infected by a virus. That's the key thing. And I'll tell you why. Vitamin C is needed, but the thing is you can get vitamin C through a variety of fruits. We need it so we don't get a disease called scurvy. Fortunately, I hope none of us have scurvy at this moment. It was a huge problem for the British Navy, particularly for sailors on long journeys without access to fresh fruits. Sorry. COVID times. There's an ambulance. Just look. Okay. So, the orange industry picked up as a result of the British Navy's demand for oranges. Then there was a time in history where there was a decline in the orange industry. There is such a thing as Big Orange wanted a way to sell more oranges. The myth of helping you prevent being prevented from getting a cold took off. It's just like the myth with the carrots. Okay, carrots do very little for improving your eyesight, for example. That's just another medical myth. Anyway, so let's continue. So there's just one example you could write in the sentence. It deals with the medical myth of vitamin C helping you prevent getting colds or flus.
What you should really be careful for is the minute you leave your home or apartment, consider how many public spaces you touch the minute you leave that home. What I'm thinking of is the rails on the metro, the door handle to a taxi. When you get on campus, every elevator.
Okay, now when I refer to the metro, or later in this video, when I refer to air travel, of course, what am I referring to? Means of modern mass transportation. In other words, what is this video about? It is about the potential of getting infected in the modern era. So let's keep on watching.
Elevator button you push. Every
Elevators,
top you touch.
modern.
Collectively, in medical terms, we call those surfaces fomites. And a fomite is any surface in which a virus can survive on. Thinking of all these areas as fomites makes you more aware of where your hands have been. And
now, what am I saying? Possibly getting coronavirus from an exposed surface, a fomite, is true. That is one way you can get infected. But it reveals how little we knew at the time. You see, why was the scientific community focusing on fomites at the time? Because we were imagining COVID as behaving like the common cold or influenza virus, which normally spreads through fomites. What we didn't appreciate, and we couldn't have because there wasn't enough data, well, COVID can survive on surfaces. And that's what we were focusing on in the early days. What we didn't realize that in the vast majority of cases, most people would get infected, not through the fomite, but via inocula. And inocula is very important as a concept to understand. Inocula refers to the cloud of virus that is exhaled by a person through speaking or coming through their nose. Okay? And what did we learn? That around up to this day now, the estimate is 85% of the infections are not from the fomites, what you touch. Okay, but being close to somebody who is exhaling an inocula, a cloud that contains the virus. In other words, if you're in close contact with that person, they've exhaled, and then you are close to them and inhale, that's the primary route of infection. We didn't know that at the time. So you see the document, I mean, this video is relatively recent, but it still is a historical document. It reflects what we knew in the early stages of the COVID and what we didn't. And what we didn't know was that the primary route of transition would be via inocula. Okay? So in other words, places that are poorly ventilated and where you have people not wearing masks, that was the primary, that is the most dangerous area in terms of contracting COVID.
And what to do in the meantime if you've touched a public service and don't have access to a sink? If you have a hand sanitizer, make sure it has more than 60% alcohol content. If you haven't access to a sink, wash your hands. The minute you get home from public spaces, wash your hands about 20 seconds. Or the rule is the time it takes you to sing 2 happy birthdays for somebody you love, not somebody you're showing up at their party just because you have to, but 2 genuine happy birthdays. The soap should be enough to kill any viruses on your hand. You want to wash your hands, every finger, as far as you can up your arms. That is simple.
Now, we're going to learn the simple tactic of washing hands. That's a modern phenomenon. I hate to say it. It wasn't until a Hungarian scientist who basically said, you know what? If doctors wash their hands with soap in the hospital, a lot of people wouldn't die. And sure enough, that led to a great medical revolution. So the bar of soap in the late 1800s transformed medicine. That is so. In other words, washing hands is still important. It's important because you can still get, of course, your hands can get infected with COVID because of fomites, even though the percentages are less. But of course, that is also just a very important fact for preventing you from getting the common cold or during this flu season, influenza. So again, that's the other word. So why is this video important for history? Well, it acknowledges the importance of soap in terms of a public health measure. There's a reason why men tend to get more infected. One is biological. Women's immune systems are stronger because, of course, when they have children, they are transferring their immune system to a new life. And so genetically, their immune systems are stronger. But there's another reason. Men tend to get more infected by whether it's the cold or COVID, is because this is really nasty. If you don't know this, sorry. Men tend not to wash their hands after they go to the bathroom. They do, number one. Of course, I do because I've been studying this for a long time, but I hate to break it to you. So just general lessons, wash your hands.
Giving you habits, not only to prevent this virus, but any virus in the future. Some of you might have traveled, might have already left and are going to come back. In terms of traveling, how do you avoid catching a virus? If you're using a plane, the most contagious part of the plane is not the airplane itself. Most people think the air is recirculated. It's the security check, those bins you touch.
Okay, so if you're in the US, the TSA zone, the Transportation Security Administration zone. Now, most of the students here were traveling internationally, but it doesn't matter. Yes, those bins that have been touched by so many people, that is a fomite. People think the plane's air is recirculated. In fact, there's filters, and those filters usually catch any microbes.
You don't know how many hands have touched those. Make sure you have a napkin with you or wash your hands afterwards. The bins tend to be the most contagious place on an airplane journey. Once you're in a plane, the back seat pockets, you might want to put your iPad in there. That could have been the home of napkins or tissues with somebody's runny nose. That could be what we call a fomite. So just be careful of that. Any screen you touch, if there's an on-demand entertainment, can be a fomite. That's what you have to look out for when you're traveling. The armrests, the tray, all of those could be fomites. Hopefully, when this virus subsides, what is the final measure?
Now, even that is a kind of, when this virus subsides, that was the wishful thinking we had in those days, that it could be contained.
Recommend. You have to realize the people in this student community who got it are relatively few, but they're also heroes.
Now that was at the point when it was March 2020, where there was only a select few students who had been infected. But this acknowledges why is that sentence important for the history of pandemics? Usually those who get infected get stigmatized. And this has been a historical phenomenon, whether it's been those infected with leprosy to those who got infected with COVID-19, that they're ostracized, stigmatized.
They could have chosen not to go to the hospital. They could have chosen to self-quarantine, but with the possibility of spreading it to the others. And this is the final message, is to realize those people who might have been afflicted with this virus, they are heroes. By going to the
Now,
hospital.
usually what happens when the first person gets infected, what's the initial reaction by the uninfected? We have to isolate those people. Okay. Now, of course, IE University is in Spain. The epicenter of COVID-19 in Europe was in northern Italy, the area outside of Milan. And it was students coming from the north of Italy to Spain that were bringing COVID-19 to the campus. And the immediate reaction amongst the students, and here we see where the kind of naked xenophobia emerges, was any student coming from the north of Italy shouldn't be allowed onto our campus in Spain. And just replicate that sentiment across the world. Anyone from this place shouldn't be allowed in our place if they have the disease. They should be isolated and ostracized for bringing this pathogen into our pristine environment.
And having themselves quarantined, they prevented you from getting it. The key is not to stigmatize them, but realize the sacrifice they made, as well as the local health community in Spain and Madrid and Segovia that helped contain this virus. Hopefully, this virus will pass, but in the meantime, the key is to be cautious, but not panic.
Cautious, not panic.
Panic causes
Still
stress,
true.
and like a lack of sleep, is also something harmful to your immune system. So the final message is, be cautious of what you've touched during the day, but ultimately don't panic. Thank you.
Okay. Now, what is missing in this? There is a major element missing in this, and it's kind of hard to imagine at that time. I didn't mention masks. Not a single word about masks. Okay. Number one, because what was the sentiment at this time? Everyone don't go rushing out to buy masks because you're depriving it of the health workers. In this modern process, not enough masks have been produced. Okay? So in other words, look what I'm saying here, or what I'm not saying at this stage. Okay, when there were not enough masks being produced, even though masks can help, I'm saying by not saying go wear a mask, it's acknowledging at this stage in the virus there weren't enough masks. Stop sharing that. And so do you see, even in this kind of public service announcement that I'm making, okay? There is, and it's not, hasn't even been, you know, it was March 2020, but that reflected how much we knew. Okay, so enough of me, let's go back to the screen, to the presentation, just a second, if you don't mind. Okay, it's fine. Okay, let me turn myself back on. Come on, there we go. So that's the exam. So in terms of the assessment, the next part is this. I want you to think about this question. I want you to think about your children. And when they asked, what did you do during the coronavirus, dad or mom? Is this going to be your answer? Maybe for some of you it's true, but I assume you did other things. And this is a question. When we talk about primary sources, what primary sources are we creating now that generations from now, okay, history students will study? The writing assignment is create a primary source about your life during this plague year, during your life during the pandemic. That's the primary source. I'm sorry, that's the writing assignment. So let's go over it. First, go ahead and pull up this article. Just do that for a second and have that ready on your computer. With the writing assignment. Here, so basically I showed you point by point, what I expect of you. The writing assignment, of course, this isn't, here you have a bit more freedom. Okay. The prompt for the writing assignment is read this article, but I'm going to discuss it on your own. And I want you to think, again, how your pre-pandemic life was the fiction. And really this writing assignment is you to kind of appreciate your pre-pandemic life and how was it transformed by the pandemic. Sorry, I don't mean to advertise for the great courses, but of course I'm an intellectual. So what do I do on my free time? I listen to the great courses. No, I'm just lucky. The ad could have been something for like Doritos or salsa. I don't know. But anyway, okay, let's look at, see, I bought this new remote. Is it working? No, what a waste of money. Or maybe it's, okay. Oh yeah, it does work, sorry. So think of the questions that Charles Yu is bringing up. And look at the following. What we feel is based on the assumption that life before the pandemic was normal and real. Now, this is what he's going to interrogate. And I want you to interrogate this. How was your life pre-pandemic and post during the pandemic? What transformation in your thought patterns? What epiphanies did you have as a result of this? I just moved my head. No, go back. My head is going. Yeah, sorry. Okay. Pre-pandemic, what kind of illusions did we live in? That our lives were separate and distinct from nature? Now, not necessarily in your case, but kind of as society as a whole. What were the kind of assumptions we had? And I want you to think about this, the assumptions we had as societies and you as individuals. That life on Earth was stable, not precarious. Despite what we know from the historical record, and this is what we examine in the humanities class, human civilization, thanks to advancements in science and medicine and social and governmental structure, exists in a bubble. Those were all advances in modernity that kind of protected us, that created this bubble. And now what happens? A cataclysmic events that illustrates how easy it is to pop that bubble. Let's think of our privilege. And of course, each of us have different kind of privileged positions in life. In this case of Charles Yu's life, okay, here he's giving his kind of socioeconomic status. Nonetheless, I want you to think about this. how we as humans, and really maybe this is what separates us from the animal kingdom, are meaning-making machines. How we kind of construct our life as a story with a trajectory that has meaning. For some of us do that to give our life our purpose, maybe not. But this is what he is now questioning. Maybe my life doesn't make sense. Or maybe this virus showed that the life for me, the kind of trajectory I created, was just a construction. It was a fiction. Now, this is the irony. We imagine disaster all the time. Think how prevalent the genre of dystopia is. Think of the summer, the blockbuster hits, where we imagine the worst. If we go from the 1990s, what's that film? Armageddon, for example, an asteroid hitting the Earth. Or think of the people who on September 11th, 2011 watched the film Contagion. We entered dark, cool theaters, the portals to other universes, which doomsday scenarios play out. But here's the key. So whether it's Armageddon or Contagion, we're behind a scrim of safety, a barrier between what we think of as possible and impossible. We watch those movies as tourists in an alternate reality. A round trip lasts 2.5 hours and usually costs anywhere from usually $10. If you buy popcorn, another $10. And then we're home, safe in the real and boring world. Now, the thing about SARS-CoV-2, it's always existed in the animal population. For thousands of years. This is what is crazy. It's just only in our recent modern era we created the conditions for that virus to jump from an animal population to this animal population. And we'll be discussing that. Homo sapiens, just like as we individuals, construct a narrative in which we are central to that narrative. And this is the key of this class, is to appreciate how narratives work. And the narrative is just simply this, a story with a beginning, middle, and end. A story that means something. We're doing the same with the pandemic, because any narrative, any film, any story needs villains and heroes. And think of how they are constructed and how they differ, actually, depending on your position. And this is the thing, like any film, there's usually a film ends with some kind of resolution. And we'll be talking about how the narrative works. In Contagion, you get a virus and the world goes somewhat back to normal, although it'll never be the same. And this is the question, are we at the resolution stage of this virus? Now, let's just think about this. We imagine life as a movie, okay? But maybe we're not the protagonists of this movie. Maybe the virus is. This is all things I want you to consider. So what is the writing assignment? I want you to learn the role of tragedy and catharsis in the humanities. You see, in ancient Greece, the tragic story was written for a purpose. It was supposed to give, in ancient Greek, the word kathar means purify, and the word catharsis means purification. People went to watch sad stories as a way of collectively ritualizing, kind of purifying themselves to experience the horrific as a mental exercise. That's why tragedy was written in ancient Greece. And that's why we're still attracted to tragedy. Think of the film Titanic. That's why we paid not only to watch it, but then watch it over and over again. So most of you are going to be writing about tragedy and catharsis. The writing assignment is supposed to teach you, write your own narrative arc. Construct a story. Even though construct a story of our fictions, our life as fictions. In this case, we're going to read about somebody named Defoe, Journal of the Plague Year. Write your Journal of the Plague Year. So basically the writing assignment is this: write a 2,000 word double spaced Times New Roman font essay, okay? This will be our continuous writing assignment. I will be asking for rough drafts. I'll announce the dates when I expect them to do, and you will get a preliminary grade. The reason I'm saying this is the writing assignment that will keep you continuously engaged with me throughout the semester. And so that when you get your final grade, hopefully there are no surprises. This is where, and you are going to have to do research. Even though if you're going to be writing about yourself, you're going to have to be doing research about the public health situation in your surrounding environment. That's going to require research for this, even though it's a creative writing. It's still a research paper, hopefully with you as the central protagonist. Include primary sources. Remember, you're writing this for your children to answer the question when your child asks, Mom or Dad, what did you do during Corona? You just hand them this paper. Or maybe it'll be a hologram, transformed into a hologram format by those years. Include primary sources. Can you find your various tweets, Instagram posts, anything that illustrates what you went through during this plague year? Now, if it's too traumatic for you, you let me know. If you want, I'm more than willing to discuss that with you. But this is the point. It's supposed to be traumatic. It's supposed to be the writing it down, getting it down on paper is supposed to be a form of catharsis. And there's a reason, the reason why I assigned this, and it's this. My philosophy of education is to teach you skills that will continue to be with you after the class is done. Hopefully, understanding how to analyze the news is a skill you will develop and then carry with you once this class is done. Same with this. Writing this assignment will be something you will never forget. In fact, it's preventing you from forgetting. And again, I'll be training you to how to do this, how to craft a narrative throughout the course. Okay. Let me just a second. How much time do we want? Okay. So here I'm just going to do just an exercise. What was 2020? What was the essence of 2020? How do we look back at 2020? Remember, for this exam, I'm teaching you what it means, the difference between modern, pre-modern, so on and so forth. Here's a good meme to illustrate that. Pre-modern beliefs were usually like this, because God put it there and that's the way it's always been. In other words, in this day and age, a lot of us still believe in God. Okay, the pre-modern exists with the modern. But there was an attempt to develop a modern science to understand the world around us, not amongst the masses. The masses weren't taught the sciences. Basically, why did things happen? Because God made it that way. Modernity not only emerged to deliver science to the masses. Remember those isms I mentioned, capitalism? There was an assumption there. Mass production and mass consumption would do what? It would take human society onwards and upwards to inevitable progress. Communism said the same. So did fascism. The thing about modernity was this: human societies achieving the condition of mass is progress. Mass transportation, mass education, mass production, mass consumption are all good things, the assumption was. They are all emblematic of how our societies are becoming modern. Postmodernism basically says both the pre-modern and modern are myths. They offer no meaning in life. In fact, there is no meaning in life except that we construct on our own. Because a lot of those modern ideologies brought destruction in their wake. Think communism. Think the damage to the environment as a result of capitalism. Think the pandemic, which emerged because modern society entered pre-modern forests and were put into contact with animal habitats. that for the most part, for most of history, were isolated and thus not infecting us with novel viruses. What was the year 2020 then? The year 2020 represented when that upward trajectory, that arrow that our societies are fixated on, came to a stop. If you look at this meme, if there's one video, don't worry, this is not a video I'll ask on the exam, but if there's one video that represents our plague year, it's this. Let me pull it up for you.
What would you rather do? Gain weight eating salads and tofu, or lose?
I don't know what.
Okay, so let's watch the following.
Day of the week it is, yeah. Is it Monday? I don't know. Is it Tuesday? I don't know. Maybe Sunday? I don't know. Every day feels the same. Every day feels the same.
I think it's Thursday.
Shut your mouth! It all feels the same. It all feels the same. I don't know what to do. So I'll just eat some snacks and get real fat and stay in my room.
Okay. Now, what does that video reveal? You see, society frowns on people who don't know what day it is and stay in their room and eat snacks and get fat, right? They aren't producing. They aren't being productive. They're called losers. That article I signed you by Charles Rule, what was he doing? His original sci-fi project he was working on was imagining a society without time. And I want you to think of the role of time, our days of the week. What are they? How do we divide the days of the week? There's the working days, the days we recover, and then work again. The days of the week are very important for the modern process. The days of the week are the producing days, and then the days we don't produce, but then we do a lot of consuming. And then what happened with the pandemic? All of a sudden, it transformed us. It transformed temporality. That's just a fancy way of saying it transformed time. And that's what that video represented. When you do your assignment, I want you to think of the transformations of 2020. And the best way to get you to think about what transformation occurred in your lives as a result of 2020 is to show you a variety of memes from 2020. Now, these memes, you got to think of them in a different way in a class like this. These memes are what I call digital artifacts. What do we mean by digital artifacts? Well, will somebody in 2040 understand these memes? Not necessarily. They're embedded in a particular time. You understand it, I understand it, your kids might not. That's what makes them historical. A single meme might not mean much, but as a historian, and look, this is kind of a digital history that I'm going to create. When I collect a series of memes, as I do here, look when you put them back to back, how they create meaning. What was 2020 about? Well, let's go through this journey in the past. Okay. There was, remember, a time of innocence? Do you remember your New Year's resolutions in 2019? This was our pre-pandemic fiction. The horror that, what does this reveal? That quarantine could last more than a year? What did 2020 do now? When you think about this assignment, and what does this meme serve as a kind of prompt? How to reassess our priorities. Hopefully, what did I say in my presentation? Don't drink a lot of alcohol. Okay, there you go. For me, it was really coffee. But look at the car that went down. What does that represent? At least the decrease in consumption of one aspect of modernity, fuel, mass transportation. Okay. But then the increase in another aspect of modernity, the internet. The perfect toy for 2020 doesn't exist. Oh, but there is. Okay. Productivity was transformed. I want you to think about this. How did your productivity get shifted? In this case, the home office. Now, do you see this? It includes video conference, crying baby, wine bottles. If 2020 was a slide. Now, I want you to think about this because in your assignment, can you think of anything positive that emerged as a result of 2020? This is something I want to think about. I can think of a lot of positive things that emerged from the pandemic. I'll tell you towards the end of the class. But you see with these memes, what are you getting? Was 2020 was an awful year. And sure, address what was awful. Address what was the swing hitting a brick wall. How 2020 was a bag of chips with the taste of orange juice and toothpaste. If 2020 was a lollipop. What was the whole idea? Now, 2021 has has its own ups and downs, but anyway. What's modern in this image here? What came to a stop? The life of the modern city. That aspect of modernity. People were no longer in the cities producing. 2020 was a scented candle. These are all just the themes of 2020 referring to, do you get here how this person is wearing a mask? Black Plague, by the way, did break out in the year 2020. And this is just a great film that I cannot remember. I think it's called A Cabin in the Woods. It's a parody of the horror flick, the horror genre film. Do you remember the Murder Hornets? I do, now that I've seen this meme. Anything that happened in 2020 was seen as ominous, according to this meme. The hero of the 2020 plague, playing PlayStation 4 again. Maybe this was you, but you maybe hopefully did something more. Just a second. Okay. Yeah. Probably a good number of you are away from grad school. But again, it just shows what was 2020 about. We tend to forget almost exactly a year into, I'm sorry, exactly a week into the year 2020. People thought World War III would break out between the US and Iran. Just to look at the other elements of the other major events in 2020 of your plague year. Passport stamps in 2020. Of course, the mask becoming kind of a mandatory, integral part of our wardrobes. And then again, let's not forget some of the wildfires that happened that year. 2020, anywhere from California, but also we tend to forget Australia had these awful wildfires. I don't know if you remember the Mayan calendars from 2020, the Mayan scare of 2012. We should be expecting an attack on Pearl Harbor, according to this. Will 2020 enter our lexicon? Compare that meme to this meme. And of course, what is, if that video I showed you was the anthem of 2020, what was the miniseries that was emblematic of 2020? Of course, Tiger King. Again, you have to watch Tiger King to understand the following. And ask yourself, how many of these activities were part of your 2020 day? How much weren't? Again, the fear of a mummy attack in 2020. Think of the Sahara Death Storm. And yes, again, think of the modern phone and how that was both a blessing and a curse during the lockdown. Again, the reflection of the mask. 2020. Summer fashion. Okay. Funny joke. Talking about the historical, how much history we experience in this year. And that's why it's important that I give you this assignment, because you're not just writing about the plague year, but all the major events that surrounded it, that you might not have been present for it, but definitely affected you. Whether it's the election, the death of George Floyd. All right. Yeah, Kevin, way to screw us up. Okay, anyway. And then finally, let's just wind this down. Again, not exactly the dystopian nightmare just yet, but our penchant for it. And you have to understand Italian. This is just a way of saying 2020, go up your. Okay, and on that note, this ends the lecture. And thank you.